Thank you, Selma. I must say that I'm really happy to be here, and I am really glad that I can share, some of our organizational work with you. Like Alex, a lot of people still don't know about our organization, and I hope that from today that, all of you would get an understanding of this organization and also would be able to share it with other people so that more people could understand, know about our organization, the importance of this organization that I'm from. So this presentation that this information that I'm going to give you, it was written in consultation with the other women in Red Thread. This is something that we always do. We always consult and ensure that we do make collective decisions. And it was also in consultation with the Global Women's Strike as well. So I have to tell you a little bit about Red Thread's history, and then I will tell you a little bit of our work. So, Red Thread was founded in 1986. At that time, there were 7 women who belonged to and who were supporters of a political party, the Working People's Alliance. It was a grassroots, multiracial political party. And the leader of that party was Walter Rodney. He's now deceased. So these 7 women, what they wanted to do was to organize with women separate from political parties, because all the other political parties at that time had what they have like women's group or so on, which was affiliated to their party. And so they wanted to organize independently. So what they wanted to do was to organize with grassroots women so that they could protest for some of the main food items that government had banned. So the women said to them, listen, we're not interested in politics. All we want was so that a way to earn income for our families. Mind you, I wasn't one of those women. I joined Red Thread 1 year after. And at that time I was just 15 years old when I joined Red Thread. So the 7 women agreed that, okay, so this is what you want, and this is what we're going to do. Now, the male members of the WPA, they were saying that, look, all the other political parties, they have these women's group that are affiliated to them, and what they could do, since they're doing this income generating project, that this income generating project could be as perks to these women to be affiliated to their party. I mean, one of the man was really surprised that, this is not what women wanted, but this is what they wanted. And many other men couldn't understand that, in that party that we weren't interested in that. Anyway, so the income generating project started, and some of the income generating work was women, at that time flour was banned, and so we started by making cornmeal and sell at a cheap cost to families. And then shortly after, flour came back into the country, and so we moved on to other things, like we started producing exercise books and school textbooks, which was very expensive for grassroots women to buy for their children. We started producing those and sell them at a really reasonable cost where people could afford to buy them. And there was also embroidery. Now, let me tell you how Red Thread got its name. All the women who were doing embroidery, they were doing some really pretty sewing. So they made like tablecloths, and they made bed sheets and pillowcases and wall hangings and so on. And most of them thought that they had to have a little piece of red into their sewing to make it more pretty. Anyway, so there was one time in the country that we couldn't find any of that colored thread to buy. So one of the women jokingly said, since we've used up all the red thread in Guyana, why don't we just name the organization Red Thread? Because by then, at that time, it was just a women's organization, and we had to name for it. And so everybody agreed, and that is how Red Thread got its name. All right, so when I joined Red Thread, I didn't join because of the income generation or any of the income generating project. What I was interested in was something that I could not have done as a child, and that is be able to talk freely, you know, about what is on my mind or to share my opinion. And so I was invited to a discussion, and I found it very interesting, and then I was invited to a second one, and I decided this is the place I want to be, because this is the kind of thing that I can do, because I know that this could really make a difference in people's life, and this is something that I want to be a part of. So three of the main strengths of the early red thread which shape our whole development were: one, in a country with deep race divides, red thread founders insisted on working with women of all main race ethnic groups. And so we started in two Indo-Guyanese communities, Metenmerzorg and the Cotton Tree. Now, Metenmerzorg is on the west bank of the capital city, and Cotton Tree is on the east coast of the capital city. And then we had two Afro-Guyanese communities, which was Linden and Victoria. Victoria was on the east coast of the capital city, and Linden was like the gateway to the interior. And at one time there was a place that produces a lot of bauxite. Unfortunately, that is not so now. Then we expanded this to an indigenous community, and it was in a place called St. Cuthbert's Mission. It is not in the it wasn't in the interior, but it's just close to the city on the way to Linden, the gateway to the interior. And then later on we expanded into the interior to other indigenous communities. So the second point is, in Guyana, where women are typically organized as arms of political parties and trade unions, you know the history like I was saying before, we decided that we do not want that, and we want to organize independently from any political party. And that's what we did. The third point was, at the time when much of the independent women organizations in the Caribbean region identified violence as what they call the most important women issues, the early red thread gave priority to the economic poverty of grassroots women. I don't want to make this more than it is, but it's important to recognize that in addition to the actual income generation, red thread founders encourage all women to come to their work and look at the importance of that work and the thing that they were producing and how much time and what they put into producing those items. So since the income generation couldn't be sustained indefinitely by the mid-90s, most of the women involved in it had left, leaving us a small number of us. So Karen D'Souza, she is one of the founders. She was really determined for this organization to continue, and so was the couple of us that were left there. And I mean, we really couldn't say, you know, pin down what is it we meant by just ensuring that we continue this organization, but we know that it was critical to our struggle for survival, and so we had to continue. Another red thread founder was Andaye. She is with us today, but she was ill at the time, so she later joined us some years after. And at this stage, we did a lot of community workshops without any funding from anyone. Later, we were able to get some funding, both for workshops and for other work, including researches. While we were very defensive about being seen as political, buying into the idea that to be political was to be party, because I mean, we really didn't understand the whole thing about politics, and all we know when people mention the word politics, we were just saying party. So looking back now, I can see the ways that we grew politically from the work we've been doing. For example, there are two examples I want to give you of that work. And one is we work extensively among indigenous communities in the interior, seeing firsthand a level of poverty far deeper than we'd known, and meeting the first bonded laborers we'd ever heard in Guyana. Now, when we went into that community, I mean, and we saw what was happening to those people, tears came to our eyes, and we just couldn't stop crying for days that we were there. You know, every time you look at these people and see what was happening to them, I mean, it was really horrible. And there were days when we couldn't even eat. Because to think about eating and looking at these people who hardly had anything to eat, we just couldn't do it. So what we did was to take most of our food and give it to these people. And myself and another member of Red Thread, at that time we were the youngest, we still are, but in an older version. What we used to do behind the rest of the other women's back was to give more food to them. And sometimes when they're looking to see where this thing is or so on, we would say, oh, we throw it out because the rats have been inside and so. Because we just couldn't bear to see that we had these and they, you know, they were suffering like that. And the conditions under which they were forced to work was really, really horrible. I remember one of the women saying to us, you know, we should never go about saying that we're poor again, because when we see this, we realize that, these people are in worse condition than we are. And that has plagued my mind, you know, for all these years. It has never left. I mean, you look at the children cannot go to school because they have to be there with their parents to help do this work, because they have to push in a certain amount of work to get a very little bit of money. And if they're not able to do that, then, and the thing is that they were working on a plantation, and the owner of this plantation had a business, so they never really see money in their hands. What they take was credit from the shop, so they work in order to be able to pay this credit, and they're always behind. So that was really sad. The other point is that we work with grassroots women across various sectors, including sex workers. I chose those two examples because they're examples of work we did in those years that broadened us. It challenged some of what was narrowed in our experience and thinking. And I knew the International Wages for Housework campaign, out of which the Global Women's Strike grew. And from 2004, a core of us began to attend international meetings organized and or through this strike. In the process, working with women from across the world, North America, Europe, India, China, Africa, and from our region, Haiti, Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, Peru, Mexico, and Argentina. These experiences broadened us in new ways. Today, we take action with other groups in the strike, in solidarity with grassroots women and men struggling in other communities, especially Haiti. And they take action with us, if they can. So I want to return to the early 2000s. Gradually, we were moved closer to the strike between 2002 to 2004. At the suggestion of Selma James of the Global Women's Strike, my dear sister here, and with the support of Solveig Francis of the International Women Count Network, 4 of us grassroots women in Red Thread, 2 Afro-Guyanese and 2 Indo-Guyanese. Red Thread is very, very keen on organizing across race, and everything we do, we ensure that, you know, we have a good racial balance. So we conducted a time-use survey with 101 grassroots women of all races in Guyana, which proved a turning point for us. To explain the organizing power the survey gave us, I need to expand on what I said earlier about Guyana being a country with deep racial divisions. This is just so you can have a sense of what the racial division is in our country. So the 2 largest groups, Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese, descendants of enslaved Africans, and then the Indo-Guyanese came later on as indentured workers. So they were set up already in competition with each other. As they came to replace the indentured workers, came to replace the slaves. So already we see where the competition was going. So then we had the indigenous people, which is the 3rd large group, and they were marginalized really into the interior, close to the borders of Venezuela and Brazil. Right, so historically there has also been a geographic separation. The Indo-Guyanese and the Afro-Guyanese, we live mainly on the coast, and the indigenous peoples, like I said, up in the interior. At times during the last 50 years now, I wasn't that old, so these are some things that I'm not that old, this is something that I've learned. So During the last 50 years or more, the conflict between Indo and Afro-Guyanese has reached the stage of violence, and this in turn led to the two groups living mainly in separate coastal communities. So what we have at the moment is communities which are mainly Indo-Guyanese, communities which are mainly Afro-Guyanese. And then we have some of the communities with, a little of both. But most of the communities, we could go into these communities and say, oh, this is an Indian community. This is an Afro community. And then later on, we see that besides that separation, the other thing that happened is that there was a whole upsurge in mining. So a lot of people started moving into the interior. And the interior now, I mean, this unfortunately is cause for the conflict, because what happened in there, when these miners move into the interior, this is Afro, Indo, and other mixed races and so on. When they move into the interior, they're taking away the lands that belong to the indigenous people. So what you find now is another kind of conflict developing there, is that the indigenous people now have conflict against the coastlanders. So, we're divided in so many different ways that it's really sad how the division goes. But if you as a casual visitor come to Guyana, you would never know that. What you would see, you're going to the marketplaces and all of that, you see people intermingling, and you would say, oh, what are they talking about? There's no racial division. Look, everybody living, but, beneath that surface, you would never understand. Unless you are living there and you know the history, then you would understand the reality of the race insecurity, the competition, and the conflict between these three main groups. The two main political parties have encouraged and exploited the racial division so that people tend to vote according to their race. Whatever these parties' manifestos are, both of them are following the same path that the IMF has set up. So, the IMF laid down all these things for us, and these are what they have to follow. So, it don't matter what party belong to, what race, and we still have to follow the same thing. But I mean, we couldn't see that because these parties have us so divided. Like we would say, they got us just where they want us, right? So we wouldn't see that all two of them are following the same pattern. We call these systems that the IMF set up the structural adjustment programs. And the other developing countries, they call it the austerity program. So you might be familiar with the austerity programs here. Right. From our own lives as grassroots women of different races organizing together in Red Thread, we already knew how much we had in common, particularly in relation to work. What the Time Use did was to allow us to quantify that work and so make visible its similarity across race. We saw the huge size of the unwaged and low-wage caring work we all do that is not recognized as work. And Selma was talking about that earlier, about this, caring work that we do. I'm sure that some of you don't realize that this is really work, Sometimes we don't value what we do, and then, so other people don't see it as important as well. So we, of course, have to start valuing the work that we do as caring work, and so that we can demand that other people see it as important. So where was I? Yes, so the caring, including the caring work and justice work that becomes necessary with the disruption of communities in racial conflict. We realize that the fact that we are grassroots women living in poverty makes our caring work harder. The survey gave all of us doing the diaries power by enabling us to participate fully in defining work as we know it and producing information about that work, which is usually hidden and even treated with contempt. Checking time use became an organizing tool, and in 2005, Guyana was hit by the worst flood ever in its history. And what we see happening there, that the flood hit all the communities. It did not discriminate against any of these communities, so we were suffering the same way as everybody else in our various communities and locations. And so what was happening then, we started doing some distribution to the shut-ins, You know, we give priority to elderly, to pregnant mothers and mothers with young babies and so on. We started that on our own in Red Thread, and then we organized with other organizations to distribute, just to ensure that this distribution reached the people that really needed them. And so when the word was out that we were doing this, you know, a lot of women started flooding our center. There was one time that we had over 300 women of different races in our center. We could see, we could feel, and we could hear the hostile, you know, the conflict and everything. I mean, some of the remarks that were thrown around, I mean, it was horrible, and some people were very, you know, there was so much tension in the room. But the fact that all of them were there, and that's what they didn't realize, is that, you know, we all were all in the same struggle. And so we asked the question to each of them, why are you here? So we hear the flood and so. And to the other, why are you here? And we hear the same thing. And so we said to them, we're all here because of one reason. And the flood really did not discriminate against any of us. The flood did not say, save Selma and attack me. It did not save me and attack Selma. All of us were in the same situation together, and if we want to, and you know, people are saying, look, they lost so many things in the flood, their kitchen gardens, their livestock, I mean, all their household things, items and so on. And so we're saying, if you really want to be able to regain your lives and livelihood, then, you know, we really have to work together in order to do that. So first we sent out word that we were ready to do this, and these women, our women just flocked our center. So what we organized was a speak out. And the speak out was so that grassroots women could talk about what they experience and to make demands for what they want in compensation for that experience. So we invited members from the government. We invited representatives from the United Nations who were based in Guyana. We invited religious organizations, the trade unions, the parliamentarians. We invited all the members of the different political parties, other NGOs and other organizations. But when we invited representatives from those places, we did not invite them to come and talk all this fancy word to us. In fact, what we invited them to do is to come and listen to what we have to say. So they were not allowed to speak or to give their fanciful speeches, but to listen to grassroots women, because we're the ones that were suffering, and therefore we didn't want to hear no flourishing speech. We wanted to make our point and make our demands. And so that was attended by over 250 people. And the women were very, very vocal. They talk about their experiences and made their demands. And that was very, very successful. And shortly after that, the government announced and allocated $10,000 per family for the families who were affected. Now the $10,000 wasn't anything much, but it was a start.
It's Guyana dollars.
So yes, Guyana dollars. Thanks, Selma. It wasn't anything much, but it was a start. And so for us, that was a victory. And then representatives from the UN called to say that they would be able to help in some ways. And what they've done was to provide for the women. They had seedlings so they could start their kitchen gardens again. And some people got back some of the household items like refrigerators and sewing machines, because we had a lot of seamstresses. And I mean, once the sewing machine was destroyed, that's her livelihood, gone down the drain. So they were able to regain some of those things. We were able to organize with the Ministry of Agriculture to go and look at the soil and see if the soil was wholesome for planting, to treat the soil so that, it could be wholesome for planting as well. And also to look at some of the livestock who were very ill and treat them so that, people could regain their livelihood. So that organizing around the flood was very, very successful. So once we were finished with the flood organizing, what we did was ask women to do 2 diaries. One of their experience during the flood, and one of their experience about their normal lives before the flood. And then we discuss how similar our lives are as grassroots women, both in times of crisis and in normal times, despite our differences of race, religion, and location. So when I tell you that the time use was a powerful tool, it's because the time use really opened our eyes, and it opened the eyes of other women to see, look, all these things that we're talking about, that we know all the different ways in which we think we're different, we have a whole lot in common. And so the time use is a powerful tool for us in doing that. But this is not a period in Guyana and most of the Caribbean, except for Haiti, excuse me, when the movement is up. You know, when grassroots women or men are active in their own defense in any sustained way. In a period like this, our job is to keep going, building our capacity and skills, our power really, and the power of other grassroots women. And we have to do this. So to achieve this, we take a self-help approach to providing services. As we say in our mission, we provide services. In our mission statement, we said we provide services to women and children exploited in unequal power relations as part of working to change those relations. So the two main services that we provide, we campaign to win a living income for unwage and low-wage women workers. And finally, last year, we were able to start a drop-in outreach program. Now, this drop-in outreach program, what we've done in that is that we've gotten the information about the labor laws, and what we've done is to train a group of grassroots women to learn and to know the labor laws, and so they now could teach it to other women in their communities. But also the drop-in center is there so that people who are exploited in their workplaces could call in to get support, to get information, to get help about how to deal with their various problems. And it is the grassroots women who are trained to do this and who are really carrying this work. We've asked the trade union representative from the trade union to come in and help us to understand the law, and we've also called in the representatives from the Ministry of Labor to come and talk to a group of grassroots women about what their roles as labor officers are. And let me tell you why we have to do it, because we want to know the law, we want to understand it, and we also want to know the organization or institution that is responsible for enforcing the law. So some of the laws that we learned besides the labor laws had to do with wages and hours of work and so on. And we also ensured that we learned the ILO Convention 189, which mandates that domestic workers have rights as all other workers. And we did a whole big campaign around the ratification of the ILO Convention as well. So we asked, what we did was a signature campaign to which we collected over 3,000 signatures. We also wrote letters and statements to the newspaper calling for the ratification, highlighting the plight of domestic workers and other low-wage workers. And we joined the Workers' Labor Day rally to protest and to call for the ratification of the Convention of ILO 189. So in that rally, the Minister of Labor, he acknowledged that he'd seen the letters and the statements in the newspaper, and that he'd seen us protesting on the roadside while they marched along, and he promised that his government will sign on to the ILO Convention. Yeah. So later on, what we did was to deliver those signatures to him, and again he promised to support us and said that we have his support and that we can call him, to report problems and so on. But I mean, he really thought that we were playing, so we were happy that we had that contact, and then he's given us his number, and we were saying, well, you will be sorry because we will be So when we asked for the representatives of the labor officers to come, was so that they could make clear their role, so that we could hold them accountable to that role when the time comes. And so the women are familiar with that law and in a way how to use it. So the next campaigning priority is that we campaign for protection and justice for women and children in violent situations. Most of this is domestic violence and sexual violence, and what we call corporal punishment in the home and in the school as well. So again, we have a drop-in center that deals, it's the one center, but we deal with the campaigning for the unwage and low-wage work, and we also deal with the aspect of violence. So the domestic violence work, we have people, grassroots women again, who train, who knows the Domestic Violence Act and the Sexual Offences Act, and who have been teaching other women, you know, what those laws have to offer. So again, people could come in, they could call in, they could come, we provide the services for them where they have peer counseling. We accompany them to the police station and ensure that police take their cases. If there's need for medical attention, we ensure that that happens. If the case has to go to court, we ensure that somebody's there to accompany them to court as a means of support, but also to look at the cases and see how it's going, and so that we could make representative to the Chief Justice about what we see is lacking. The way in which we organize is that we really are not into just providing services. So hence our self-help approach. So women learn these laws and they're able to use it in their own defense and in the defense of other grassroots women. So what we've done in providing these self-help services is that we've helped them to be able to direct how their cases go. And we had cases where one example was this woman went to court, and this is a domestic violence case, but her lawyer was not there. But because she had that knowledge of the Domestic Violence Act, she was able to use it to win her case. Now the laws are written in ways, in language that is really foreign to a lot of us, and it is not easily accessible to ordinary people. So what we've done in Red Thread was to access the law, study the law, and then write it in simple language that anybody reading it could understand. And we made little booklets, which we made accessible to grassroots women so that they can have and use. And then we also did a booklet on domestic violence, you know, explaining the whole thing about domestic violence and the cycle of violence and so on. We are in the process, and we're almost finished doing the same thing for the Sexual Offences Act, and we've already started compiling information to do another booklet, which would be to deal with the labor laws, including the ILO Convention 189, to make that also accessible to grassroots women. Okay, so we really work to ensure that, you know, grassroots women have a visibility and voice. So earlier this month we launched a pilot TV program, and it is called Grassroots Women Real Issues, which will further increase, and this will further increase the collective visibility and voice of all of us grassroots women. And grassroots women are the ones who are running this TV program, highlighting the plight of grassroots women. And it's not just about us talking, but we open the space where people could call in also to share their opinion and view. And so we're doing this for, as I said, as a pilot, and it's going to be run for like 5 months. Okay, so since 2000 we have run the Women's Center, which I told you before. I'm trying not to do a lot of reading here, but sometimes I don't remember, so I have to go back to my writings to ensure that I don't miss anything. So this center that we have, we own it. And we own this center locally by both, we have then done fundraising, and we've had donations. Some of what we've had to do to own our own center is to forego our stipends that we were getting for 1 year. So the idea to forego our stipends came from a woman whose name was Cora Bell. And she's a founding member of Red Thread. She's now deceased, and she was my mother. So September last made 1 year since she died. She was a very dynamic woman who was very keen on the development of Red Thread, and therefore was like a driving force to many of us. She had a lot of influence on us. She really wanted to see Red Thread grow, so she's always pushing, and nobody questioned, you know, why she was pushing, but everybody knew that what she was doing was for the betterment of Red Thread, and so we were just going. So we've really lost one of our really vibrant members, but you know, all her work is still there, and it will live on because we will always remember that, and we will continue to push. So even though she's gone, you know, the driving force is still there, and so we're going to press on. All right. So our drop-in center, our drop-in and outreach service, right? We named it in honor of Cora, and also another extraordinary Caribbean grassroots fighter, and her name was Clotilde Walcott. She was the founder of the National Union of Domestic Employees of Trinidad and Tobago. So our center is named Cora and Clotilde Drop-in Outreach Program. This may be a good point at which to mention that Red Thread is a founding member of the new Caribbean Domestic Workers Network, and that we serve on its steering committee. We are not a union, and we don't want to be any union. But this developed naturally out of our long years of campaigning for a living income for the lowest wage women workers, many thousands of whom are domestic workers. So I want to talk a little bit on the funder, and I'm almost to the end. So, Red Thread is funded mainly by funding agencies and donations, and we also receive an annual stipend from the government, which is 25,000 Guyana dollars, which is the equivalent of 125 US dollars. That is just to show how they think of our work. There's really a sign to show that. A part of our work is therefore ensuring that what we do is not dictated by funders. And we're quite successful at this. Although they still take up too much of our time on the requirements of their application and reporting forms, which are definitely designed to keep poor people out. Very few of them, after all, have any interest in funding the movement. Their requirements are particularly burdensome because we don't operate with a staff, but with a part-time and full-time volunteers. And we are mainly grassroots working class women. So we have no requirements for certification to be a member or part of Red Thread. The members of Red Thread receive on-the-job training in relation to our mission and objectives. The methods we find most effective with the women with whom we are organizing, and our administrative needs as well. I want to expand on this a bit. Most of us did not attend high school, did not attend university. Some of us have primary education, and some of us have secondary education. But we have these skills, and I must add that we have these skills, and in some cases, more than a lot of people who graduated from university. Please don't feel that I'm attacking you. I'm not attacking you here, but it has to be said, and it's important for me to say this because, you know, in my experience and experience of other grassroots women, academics are very, very hostile to us. You know, they throw around all these fancy languages and words, and to me, I don't even think some of them really understand these terms and words that they use. But I think they use it really to intimidate us. But you know what? Over time, I've learned that really, they're not intimidating us, you know. They're really intimidated by our practical knowledge and skills. And that's their way of trying to defend themselves. There's a difference between working to advance personal ambition and working to change the world. And our aim is to work to change the world and put personal ambition aside. At the beginning I said that the politics of Red Thread today in some ways a continuation of its earliest politics. The difference is key. And it is today we define our objective as to organize with women, beginning with grassroots women, to cross divides and transform our condition. And we are working internationally to do that. Thank you.